Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome in across the continent and beyond for another very exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. Happy back from Easter break. I hope you all had a wonderful, relaxing time away. I hope you all stay tuned to Artemis 2 going around the moon and bringing us some of the most incredible images you will ever see from space. It is a wild time to be interested in science and exploration, and I hope you've had the chance to check us out. Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. We've had Jeremy Hansen, who's on Artemis 2, on our program. Lots to explore and discover there. Now, before I dive in with today's topic and our epic series we're starting with, I do want to note we have a Kahoot today. So between our talk and our Q&A, if you want to play along with a little 4-question quiz, you can pull up that game pin below. Extra way to keep it interactive. Now, today is particularly exciting because we are starting up again with a series we've done for several years with our friends at the Canadian Wildlife Federation, and that is National Wildlife Week. I know we've got a lot of Americans here today, but if you are in Canada, we like to celebrate by showcasing some of the most incredible creatures in our huge, monstrous country. There are kids that are in BC today joining that are further away from me than I am to Morocco. I'm in Newfoundland, and I'm closer to Africa than I am to BC. We've got a really big place up here, and there's some incredible creatures in our amazing country. So today, we start by celebrating our friends, the bats. And to do that, we've got our friend, Dr. James. Now, Dr. James is one of the coolest people we've ever had on. Bats are one of my very favorite creatures, and that's why there's over 700 of you here from across the continent and beyond. So, without further ado, to hear about our flying furry friends, I'm going to bring in James. Thank you so much for joining us again, and welcome back to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I know you've got a lot to share with us, so I'm going to dip off into the background and let you take us away with our bat journey with this amazing picture to begin. And so let's get to it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And so, so I'm James. I'm with the Canadian Wildlife Federation. We are based in Ottawa, Ontario, but we have projects across this large country, as Jesse was just talking about, and on different animals that are found across Canada, but also beyond. And the theme for the webinar series this week is all about the senses. And so a great group of animals to talk about this are bats, especially since we often hear this idea that bats are blind, right? Or the expression is blind as a bat. Now I say groups of animals because there's more than just one or two types of bats. And these different types are called different species. Now you don't have to answer this out loud, but I just want you to think about how many different species of bat do you think there are in the world? And we're going to find the answer out to that in just a second. So just like we have owls within the overall group of like birds, right? We have birds, but within that we have owls. We have the overall group, the group of bats that are in the overall group of mammals. So just like owls are to birds, bats are to mammals. But just like there's more than one kind of owl, we have many different kinds of bat. And this group that we call bats, scientifically are called Chiroptera. And Chiroptera actually really means in English, hand wing. And this is because this image here we see, this highlights the fingers of the bat. So you see all of these long strands here are actually finger bones from the bat, which makes up the wing. So that's why we call the basically wing is their hand. It's not really the arm is the first part that we don't see highlighted here. And so that's where the name Chiroptera or hand wing comes from. And bats live all across the world. And it sounds like we have people from various places around the world. They're one of the most widely distributed groups of animals. When we see in this map at the bottom here, the red part has more than 120 different species of bat in those areas. The blue part, there's a few less, but that just shows that there's bats across every spot that we see color on this map. There are bats that live there. And now to answer that question, we have more than 1,300 different species of bat around the whole world. Here in Canada, we have about 18 or 19, and I say about, and I'll explain why. Those are different species in Canada. Now, because there are many different areas that they live in, bats have developed differently to make use of these different habitats and different specializations. And there's huge variation of sizes with these specializations as well. And they'll use their senses differently depending on what that is they specialize on. Like we have the largest bat in the world, and this is a flying fox, the golden crowned flying fox. This bat, its wingspan, if it opens up its wing, it can be almost 6 feet across. So the height of this bat is the height of a lot of people are about the same height as this bat is. And as we see in the photo here, this bat is eating fruits. So these are seed dispersing bats because when they bring the fruits around, they disperse the seed of the fruit. We have other bats that use their keen, and the fruit bats will use their keen sense of smell as well as sight to find the fruits to eat. Same with the pollinating bats. They'll use their sense of smell to find flowers that they eat the nectar from, and then that spreads pollen around, just like bees and butterflies do. And we don't have either kind of those bats in Canada. We don't have pollinating or fruit-eating bats in Canada. We have insect-eating bats. We see on the bottom left, now this isn't a Canadian species, but I just want to show the size difference. This is a full size, it's called the bumblebee bat. And that's a full-grown bat as compared to the huge flying fox we have in the upper right there. So bats can be really different sizes and shapes. The one on the bottom right is a bat we have here in Canada as well. And a good action shot of it eating a grasshopper. So these are bats that specifically eat insects. And to do this, they use their great sense of, well, they use some sight, but they use a really cool thing using their great sense of hearing, which is called echolocation. And I'm going to explain what that is. So bats around in Canada and in the United States, they fly out at night, but it's dark and they can see big objects to fly around. But remember what they eat. They eat small insects, which are too small to see at night. And so they use this excellent sense they have called echolocation to sound out a high-pitched sound. When the sound goes through the air, and they make this call from their mouth, it bounces off an insect or anything else and bounces back to the bat so they can find out things about what that sound is hitting, like the distance that is, the size of the thing that it's hitting, and the texture, so whether it's rough, as well as the orientation, which way the insect might be flying. Each individual bat makes its own distinct call, so you can actually tell what species of bat it is based on their call. But we can't hear that as people, so we have instruments like this that can make the call audible. And if you listen really carefully, if you could hear that, those little clicks are the sound that the bats will make as they fly through the air. And we can't hear that, but that device that you saw a quick little picture of makes it audible. So that's the sound that device is picking up, and it will graph that on a graph, and we can tell what species of bat is based on the call that they make. And which is really cool for research, because then we can tell what the species is without having to catch it or look at it closely. Now, I mentioned we have 18 or 19 species of bat in Canada, and I say that because this top one, we see the Brazilian, or it's called Mexican free-tailed bat. It's been found in Canada, but we're not sure it's here as a resident, meaning we're not sure it's here permanently or frequently enough that it's like making home in Canada, but pretty certain, but the research is still out on that. All 8 of our species of bat in Canada are species at risk of extinction, which means if we're not careful and we're not doing things to protect these bats, they may be lost from Canada and potentially from other parts of the world as well. So those red bats that are highlighted in red here are what we call species at risk. Now, of those bats we have in Canada, we have 3 species that are migrating bats. So just like birds, these bats will actually migrate from Canada down south and as far as Mexico in some cases. But when they do that, they're at a bit of a risk for impact with wind turbines, though. So the windmills that make electricity. So the main threat to them is because of that, because they fly high and they fly long distances. These wind turbines can get in their way and cause some mortality. So it can cause some bats to die. Most of our bats in Canada, though, they're hibernating bats, which is what I think a lot of people think of for North American bats, is that they hibernate for the winter. And here they'll typically hibernate in caves. They're able to lower their body temperature quite low, and they can kind of be just above freezing, and they slow their metabolism, so their heart rate and everything slows down in their body to be able to save energy. They go back to the same cave to hibernate every single year. They use their great memory of navigating and using this echolocation, like we talked about, to kind of find their way through through the habitat and through trees, as well as their sight to return to the same cave every year. Now, this hibernation time, though, is what poses a threat to some species of bat here in Canada. And of these hibernating bats, the red ones we see highlighted in red, they're at risk of catching a disease which is called white nose syndrome. This is something that only affects bats. It doesn't affect people. But what it does, and it's called white nose syndrome, I think everybody can guess why, right? Yeah, we can see that picture on the left. It gives a powdery look to the nose. So it's basically like a fungus, a mushroom that's growing on the nose, and then also some of the wings of the bat, which is why it's called white nose syndrome. But it doesn't affect people. And it typically, the fungus is actually kind of from a mushroom, and that will grow in caves over winter. Now, this is something we never had in Canada before until about 15 years ago. And what happened was the bats in Canada, so this fungus came from caves probably in Europe, where the same kind of bats live, but they're used to it. They grew up like over thousands and thousands of years with this fungus, and they can cope with it. Our Canadian bats is something totally new, and so they're not used to this. It's waking them up in the winter. And remember what bats eat, right? Here in Canada, you wake up in the winter, there aren't any insects around. So they get hungry and there's no water either. So a lot of them die over winter if they get woken up too much. But what's really encouraging is it's been about, like I said, over the last 10 or so years, some of the bats are showing some resistance, which means they can kind of handle it, the fungus a little bit. So they're not waking up as much. It's a bit of an evolution kind of thing, really sped up, that like unfortunately the ones that get woken up and don't survive well don't make it, they don't survive. But the ones that do, that maybe you can handle the disease a little bit more, are the ones that reproduce and have babies, and those babies might also have that resistance. But there's also a problem that of the ones that survive, they face some other threats. So we want to make sure that the bats that don't die from white nose syndrome then don't also get threatened by other things that might harm them. So some of these other things are like habitat loss, which affects more than just bats. I know most species around the world, if they're at risk, a lot of it is because of loss of habitat. So for bats, this is loss of forest areas and wetlands and areas to hunt, because they eat insects, and they'll often feed over top of wetlands and in open areas, but they also need forest areas to roost, like to stay during the daytime, because bats are only out at night. But also pesticides, and I've said this a few times, right? We think about what bats eat here in Canada. Well, think about what pesticides do, right? They are designed to reduce insect populations, so to kill some of the insects that we don't want eating farm crops. But when that does that, it also removes the insects that bats would then eat. And what's amazing, though, is bats they provide like $30 million of pest control. So they eat enough insects that then farmers don't have to use as much pesticides for their farms. So they can save, like across North America, $30 million a year just because they don't have to use as much pesticides. Now, there's also the threat of these wind turbines, which we talked about already. And the last threat I want to talk about is something called an eviction. So I don't know if in your school, have you ever been sung to the hall, or have some of your friends having to go to the hall or to reflection? That's kind of like an eviction. So basically, when you're removed from somewhere and have to go somewhere else, then it's an eviction. For bats, this is being evicted from their house, from a building. And when you're sent to the hall, it's usually permanent, right? I don't think it's there forever. But with bats, when they get removed from a house, it's often forever. And that means they lose access to their roost site, so where they can go to be safe during the day when they're not flying around at night. So what we want to know is, for some of the work that Canadian Wildlife Federation is doing, is what is the impact of an eviction? Where do bats go when they can't go back into a roost site? And what does that have on their habitat, on their behavior? And so one way we can do that is we do something called tracking studies. So this is basically, we follow the bats to find out where they go. So the first thing we would do if we want to follow bats, we have to catch it first. So we set up nets that look like this right before sunset, because bats come out of their roost at sunset and they'll fly into these nets. Now, it doesn't hurt the bat. They get a little bit tangled up, and then we take them out right away. And we remove them from the nets. So then we handle the bat. And anybody touching a bat here in these, as researchers, we all have vaccinations, we all have training. So nobody can just go and try and catch bats. This is done by people who know what they're doing and have all the training for it. Then we take some measurements. We look at the bat, we measure, and we can check out their wing, how healthy it is. We also look to see if there's any signs of the white nose syndrome to see on the bats, and we record all that information. And then we will attach an armband to the bat. And this is like a little bracelet. It doesn't go through the bat wing and it doesn't harm the bat. It just pinches around the front arm of the bat. And each one of these little metal clips has a number on it. So if we ever recatch this bat again, we can find out a lot of information about the bat, where it was caught. We can find out the age, because actually there's no way to tell the age of a bat except from that being a young bat or an older bat. And a young bat basically means like a year old or less. And there's only a way we can tell from this picture here. There's a little knuckle there, and we can tell if that knuckle is joined or if it's open. And when it's open, that means it's just born in that year. And after a year, that knuckle joins. And there's no other way to tell the age of a bat, which some bats can live up to 30 years. And so we wouldn't know how old this bat is unless we caught it, we put a band on it, and then maybe we'll find it again in 10 or 15 years, and we'll know it's at least 10 or 15 years old. Then what we do is we're going to add a little tag. So this is actually just shaving a little bit of the hair off the back of the bat. Doesn't hurt the bat. And we have to make a little spot that we then can attach what we call a tag on. This tag is a little transmitter that then sends out a signal that we can use some of our other equipment to track the bat where it goes. And we can find out the location of the bat afterwards once we put this little tag on. So this tag is attached with, this is like surgical glue. So something doctors would use to instead of stitches. And it just falls off after 2 weeks. So again, it doesn't hurt the bat. The tag will fall off. The bat can fly fine with it. And so we attach this with some glue. We let the glue dry for a few seconds, and it dries really quickly. And the bat, we can't hear it, but the bat's making little chirp sounds. So as I said, they can do echolocation. They can also make sounds that we can hear, which is really cool because it just sounds like little chirps. And it's not too happy, but she gets to get let go, and we often will give her a little bit of food too while we're at it. So they're fed for the night. And then we have the tag on the bat, and then we let the bat go, and she flies away into the night. And then we try and find them. So we use this, we're kind of almost do something like echolocation in a sense, but instead of us sending out a signal, these are antennas. This is attached to our car, or we can carry one around, or you do it by hand. And instead of sending out a signal, it's receiving the signal from the tag. So kind of like, remember the video with the echolocation is that the bat can receive the signal that bounces off an insect and kind of figure out where that insect is. We use the signal that's coming from that tag, and getting to our antennas, we can tell where that bat is. And we drive around, we try and find our bats. So what we want to know is, where did the bats go? And really what we find out is that it depends. So this is a spot, this is an eviction, and it's done at the right time of year. So one thing that's really risky for bats is if you do an eviction like this, so the bats are trying to get back in this mess area. They left at the beginning of the night. They flew around, they did their eating. And this is like, it's actually darker than what it looks like in the video. This is like 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning. They're trying to land and go back in, but they can't get back in. And this is okay for the bats right now, but sometimes in the summer, in the middle of the summer, when you have little pups, the pups aren't flying. So the moms will leave, but they can't get back in to feed their pups. But they're really persistent, and sometimes they do get back in and they find a new spot. But what happens if they can't, the pups are trapped inside, the moms leave, and then they can't get back in to feed the pups. And that's really bad for them. Also, we don't want to do this when moms are very pregnant. Even if they have the pups inside them and they're pregnant, it's an impact. It's a negative stress on them that we don't want to do that. So an eviction like this only has to be done at certain times a year to make sure that we don't cause any harm, or that a homeowner or the person doing this doesn't cause any harm to the bats. So where do they go then? Sometimes, like I said, they go back into the house. Sometimes they'll use bat boxes. So just like people put up bird houses for birds, people can build bat houses, put them up. And when we were doing our study, we found some bats would go in and use some of these bat houses. Sometimes they'll go to trees in the forest. Even in this case, we had a bat that we found in this hole in a telephone pole. So I guess it thought it was a tree. But often I say go to the neighbors. Might not be the neighbors, but they tend to prefer houses, we found. Buildings or barns or sheds. Found most of the time bats are preferring these nice spaces inside because it's sheltered. It's a big space for them to move around in. But the problem is with this, if the next person over finds that the bats are using their next building and they do an eviction, and then the next person does an eviction, eventually this can cause some harm, and the bats are losing spaces to go and stay in. So the best thing we can do is to make sure that bats aren't impacted. If they're in a building that's not really harmful to them, or that's not being a problem for the homeowner, then it's good to just kind of leave the bats where they are. So I want to talk back about why all this matters, why are we doing this work, and why we think bats are, really important to what we're doing. As I talked about, bats are really important both to people, but also to ecosystem, right? They keep insect populations in check. They eat a lot of mosquitoes and help with our agriculture to remove insects that would otherwise damage our crops. In some parts of the world, they're pollinators and seed dispersers. They face a lot of threats, and almost all because of people. So we have pesticides, a lot of the threats I talked about before, the pesticides, the evictions, even cats. People's cats, just like they catch birds, will catch bats. So a lot of bats are at risk or at risk of extinction because of people. And that's what the case is. So as I said, 8 of our bat species in Canada are at risk of extinction, and others face other threats as well. But the great thing is that there are things we can do to help. So things we can do, as I said, bats will use bat boxes, and only some species of bats. So some of those cave dwelling ones, remember the ones that hibernate, of those, there's actually only 2 species that will use bat boxes. So it's great for those 2 species, but there's more than just putting up bat boxes that we can do. But if anybody's looking to build a bat box, we have designs and places to buy them on our website, which you'll see in a second. But beyond bat boxes, remember, pesticides can be bad for the population of insects that bats need to eat. So we can reduce pesticides on our own lawns or in our gardens. We can also leave habitat. So even a dead tree could be habitat for bats, but also for other wildlife. Like in this case, it's a squirrel using it. But a hole like this could be great for bats. And so if there's a dead tree on the property and it's not dangerous to fall over, then you can leave that for a bat to have a home in. Also, live trees obviously are really good for bats and many other wildlife species. And then this is a bit of a complicated design, but it shows the timing of when bats are active. So remember, I was talking, if we evict bats from a building at the wrong time of year, and that would be right here. So basically in the summers when we should not be doing an eviction or removing bats from houses, because that's when the moms are very pregnant and the pups are being born. And then they're able to fly. Pups are pretty crazy. They can fly within a couple of weeks after being born, but they're not strong flyers until kind of into August. So this is why we would say you leave bats in a building or not evict them during the summer months is best. And also tell your friends, spread the word about how cool bats are and learn more about the bats and what we can do. And something else we can learn more, and I'm just going to finish with some of the ideas around bats and one last couple of things to think about to learn a bit more. You can go to helpthebats.ca. That's our website that has a bunch of information about bats. But we can think about bat myths and misconceptions. So basically, things that aren't quite true about bats, but a lot of people think about. And I think people think bats are a little bit scary because maybe they don't know a whole lot, or they don't they believe some of the myths. So I wanted to talk about a few of those as we finish up here. So the first one, we hear bats are blind. And from what we've heard already, we know that's not true, right? In fact, bats can see really well, and beyond seeing, just like us, they can't see in the dark, right? But beyond seeing, they have this really cool ability to echolocate, and they can kind of map out their habitat and what's around them in total darkness. Some people hear that bats will fly into our hair. Well, like I said, bats have this great way of navigating. They're not likely to fly into anybody's hair and get caught. Often what we might see bats flying around near us outside at night might just be because they're trying to eat the mosquitoes that are they're looking to bite at us. So they're really kind of helping us out a little bit at night. We've heard of the myths that bats are Dracula or can turn into vampires. But definitely not the case. There are what are called vampire bats. Some of those will live in the kind of southern part of the United States or in Mexico. We don't have any of those in Canada, but even where they do exist, they're not like the scary thing that people think about, that they bite and suck blood through their fangs. They actually will just make a little bite on animals, very, very rarely, almost never people. But it's cows or other animals that are outside a lot of the time, and they lick up the blood. So they don't suck blood through fangs or anything either. And the last one I wanted to mention, in that people think of, is that bats have lots of diseases. Well, in a way, this is kind of true, right? We talked about white nose syndrome, and it's a disease that gets them, but it doesn't affect people. But But there are other concerns about rabies. We hear about bats and rabies a lot. And bats can, just like any other wild animal, can carry rabies, and it's best to stay away from and not touch wild animals. But it's less than like 1% of bats will have that. But rabies is very serious. So if anybody comes into contact with a bat with bare hands, like we never want to touch wild animals, you should definitely get it checked out and see a doctor for an opinion to make sure, because it is really serious if it happens. And the last thing I want to leave as a kind of a myth is that bats aren't scary. I think the myth is that bats are. I think they're not. But what is scary is not having bats around anymore. So the thought of extinction of bats would be really bad for our environment, for our ecosystem, and just be really sad.
No more important message than that, James. And I mean, we are going to highlight all the Help the Bats website, everything you guys are doing, National Wildlife Week, and more. Really, really appreciate the deep dive on bats. I've seen bats my whole life. I've gone out at night to catch bats with professionals. I didn't handle them, but I watched the professionals handle them. One of the great experiences I've ever had. I can't encourage you enough, kids. Learn more about bats. They're really, really special creatures. And we just thank you for your attention today. Now, James, we're going to dive in with our Kahoot. If you want to come out of screen share, you can see us again, have a bit of a conversation. Great. We're going to begin with 4 questions to see who is paying attention, have a little bit of fun for some bragging rights, and what you win for the Kahoot. The faster you answer, the more points you get, is James and I's everlasting respect. So we are going to begin with this, and then we're going to dive in with Q&A with all our live classes. YouTubers, you guys are already sharing a whole bunch of questions, which is awesome. I must admit, I hope, yeah, we've got a lot of bat names in this one. I hope a bat name wins. That's very biased of me, but 56 of you. Let's see if we get one. And James, if you want to help us out with any hints along the way, you can guide us in the right direction, perhaps, as we go along. Here we go. Question 1. How many kinds of bat are there? 125, 400, 1,500 plus, or 30? Only 30 kinds of bat? Maybe a bit more than that. Maybe quite a bit more than that. James, what's our hint for this one?
It would be there's quite a few.
Yeah. Yeah. Open your eyes as wide as possible. It's one of the 2 biggest groups of mammals, them and rodents. There are way more of them, primates and antelope and all sorts of other things. 1,500 plus is correct. Most of you got this right. Let's see. Lovely Dragonfly has our lead, barely over Zany Coral. Okay, question 2, true or false? Bats are blind. We drove this point home. You mentioned it multiple times, and I appreciate you for that. And maybe this picture of this flying fox with like gigantic monster eyes will help give the hint away. But I will say, James, when we do this question in bat programs, usually it's 50-50. People really, really, really want to think that they're blind. And the answer, we still have 2/3 of you. Yeah, okay, 2/3 of you are right. Bats are not blind. So for the 14 of you who picked they're blind, they're not. They can see, I promise. Very good. Okay, let's go to question 3. Zany Coral takes our lead. Okay, question 3. White nose syndrome is a what disease? Is it a fungal, bacterial, viral, or we don't know? We got a picture of it. We talked about it a bit. James, what are we going to give them as a hint?
Yeah. Remember I talked about it being like a mushroom type thing. It has spores.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Mushroom, another name for kind of... 2 more seconds to figure it out. The answer is fungus. Yes, most of you got this right. We do know what it is. We're working to try and prevent it as much as possible, but we know it's a fungus. Lovely Dragonfly retakes her lead, barely over Snowy Mouse. Question 4, how can we help bats? That I couldn't even fit all the possibilities on this thing, but is it build a bat house? Tell your friends and family what you learned today. Don't clear dead trees or bats can roost. Or hint, hint, nudge, nudge, if you've ever joined me for a Kahoot before. All of the above, perhaps, and more. You can go back to that slide, and you can check out helpthebats.ca to find out all sorts of ways you can help. There are lots of ways the class, wherever you are. The answer, yes, is all of the above. James, they killed it. They got most of them right. Okay. Dr. Ladybug is third. We're going to Mr. Hancock's class first. Lavie, Mr. Dunn, Mrs. Fisher, and then we're taking some from our YouTube friends and going to do a whole second round. Zany Coral is second and first, barely. Lovely Dragonfly, almost wire to wire. Way to go, guys. Nicely done, and let us know who you are in the chat. We are going to start with Georgetown. Mr. Hancock's class, come on in and take us away with your bat emoji name. Hey.
Hey, James. Thanks so much. We enjoyed the presentation. One of our students was wondering how exactly a bat can lower its temperature.
That's great. Maybe I didn't explain it perfectly well. I think it's because they hibernate in cold areas. So it's not the bat themselves that lowers their body temperature, it's the surroundings, because they hibernate in areas that are below or just barely above freezing. So they let their temperature get down to match the environment a little bit. And what's really cool is that some bats will roost at different spots. Like we have different species of bats. Some of them are better at being in the cold than others. So the ones that can tolerate the cold a little bit more will go in the colder areas of the cave versus other species that might be in the warmer areas.
Great question. We've never had that one before. Thanks, Mr. Hancock.
Yeah, that's great.
Lavi, we're going to head to North Carolina. Come on in and take us away in North Topsail Beach.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Hi.
So I was wondering, what are some new bat species?
New bat species. Oh, that's a good one. I don't know all the new ones. I know a lot of our Canadian bat species, but there are over 1,500 different species around the world, and there's some new ones are being discovered a lot of the time, often in the tropics area, so like in the really warm areas of the world. And I don't know what the newest ones are. There's just so many to keep track of.
You stumped the expert. This is the joy.
I was going to say, you stumped the bat expert.
Every time we go to like really dense tropical forests and we go looking for new species of all kinds, not just bats, we find them. Like the tropical rainforests of this planet are some of the most special places on Earth. And if you're keen to find a new species, name one after someone you love, you can become a biologist and go do that. It's a pretty special thing on planet Earth. So great question, Lavi. Mr. Dunn, we're heading back to you. Grade 4s, come on in. And Mrs. Fisher, we're coming to you next. Hey, guys.
Hey, Elam has a question.
How many babies do bats have?
That is a great question. I know, as I said, I know mostly the bats in Canada, and generally for North America is about the same, but most bats, and I meant to mention it earlier, so I'm glad you asked, most bat species will only have one pup per year. So it's one baby per year, whereas often people think bats are like mice.
Yeah.
Bats are not rodents at all like mice. We'll have like litters of dozens. A bat will only have one, sometimes two pups per year. So not a lot.
Neat as that. So what's interesting about that is that, like, again, based on the size of them, based on what they look like, you sort of your mind goes to mice, but it's much more like a seabird. Like a lot of seabirds will have 1-2 babies in good times. That's really, really neat. Thanks for that question, guys. We've had 3 questions we've never had on in the history of Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants in a bat program before, so you guys are great.
That's awesome.
Mrs. Fisher, Carsonville, come on in. Take us away. Hey.
What are bats allergic to?
Allergic to? I don't know if bats have allergies. There's another question I've never had before. That's great.
Seriously, you guys are killing it. I'm going to look this up, James, in the chat. I mean, you would know more than almost anyone, but I'll do like a Google search as we go along and see if there's any. I've never heard of allergies being tested in any animal ever, other than maybe like dogs and cats.
Yeah, I don't know.
Cool.
And I mean, bats will eat different things, right? Depending on where they're from. So like I said, our Canadian bats and North American bats will eat mostly insects. So I wouldn't say it's an allergy, but they wouldn't eat nectar or fruits. But then the fruit eating bats probably won't eat insects. So they have their special diets. But I don't know if there's an allergy that's known for bats.
We're stumping the expert all over the place. This is the point of National Wildlife Week, is for you to have the best questions in the world. YouTube, I'm heading to you for a few questions, and we're going to do back with a whole other second round because, James, you're whipping through these. Dominic at our Argyle Center crew in Edmonton wants to know, why are there no ground bats, like bats that can't fly?
Wow. Well, bats are the only mammal that can fly, which is pretty cool. So, people have heard of flying squirrels, right? Flying squirrels, despite their name, don't actually fly. They glide. So they can go from one tree and glide across to another. But bats are the only mammal that can do powered flight. So they use their arms, their wings, remember their hand wings, to flap to actually propel themselves forward. So that's kind of what they've evolved to do. So they're specialists to be able to fly. But what's really cool is some bats can actually even swim. They land on the water, not intentionally, but they can land on water and actually swim in the water. But other bats, like I was talking about, there's some places where vampire bats live. Vampire bats all bats can crawl, but they don't tend to want to. But vampire bats actually can run on the ground. There's actually a scientist has done some experiments that puts these bats on a treadmill, and they actually see them like running on a treadmill. They go pretty quick, and that's kind of how they think those vampire bats are getting at their prey. Is they'll run along the ground and climb up onto like a cow or something like that to feed, as opposed to flying in at them and dropping on top. They think it's maybe more sneaky, and they can get up and sneak up on an animal that way. So It's pretty cool that bats can actually kind of run along the ground.
I just put it in the YouTube chat and the StreamYard chat. Everyone should watch the bat treadmill. It's just a spectacular.
It's pretty cool.
Miss Cork's class, they're joining in Stratford. They want to know how many bats are usually caught in a night.
That really depends. So when we go and we catch at a building, we know there's a roosts there. So it means the bats that we're catching in particular will tend to roost all together. So they like to be in big groups. So if we're at a building that has a lot, or a tree roost that has a lot of bats, we've sometimes caught 200 bats in our nets in one night.
Wow.
But if we're just trying to if we don't have a roost that we know about and we're putting up nets in a place that we don't know, we may only catch a couple. And then those are colony roosting bats, but there's other bats that are solitary. So we have other species that kind of just fly, and they live under bark in trees or in tree cavities, tree holes, but they are more like, 1 or 2 bats stay together and they don't form these big colonies. So to catch some of them, it's a little bit harder. You don't get so many of them.
I want to stress, this is the bat side of the equation. We've done programs where we catch birds in nets as well, and they talked about catching like 360 owls a night. Like, it's amazing how many things you can capture when you know where creatures are going to be in a set location. You've got the right tools, right staff like James. Really, really special stuff. Great question, guys. All right, Mr. Hancock, I'm coming back to you in just a minute. Elena Bracebridge wants to know, if bats are out on a windy night, the leaves in a tree are rustling in the wind, would bats use their echolocation and think it was an insect? Can they make mistakes in what they're using their echolocation for?
Wow, that's another good question. I don't know if I've had that before. I think, yes, they probably could make some mistakes with the windiness. Although what's interesting is when the winds are really high, the bats tend to be out less even. This is because, remember what they eat, right? They eat insects. If it's really windy, if you've ever been out on a windy night and you're getting bit by mosquitoes, all of a sudden a big wind picks up, mosquitoes seem to go away a little bit, right? So if there's not as many insects out, bats realize that they're not going to have a good meal, so they might not be worth their effort going out and flying around as much. So when it's really windy, they tend to not go out quite so much.
I also like this. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, another really cool thing that insects will do is some insects can make a fake sound that makes it sound like it's the echolocation for the bat, and it makes the bat think that the insect is somewhere else, and that tricks the bat to like actually missing it. So they've like kind of co-evolved this like defense mechanism to counteract the echolocation, which is pretty cool.
I was going to mention that. I'm so happy you did. So in the same way that some things like a stick insect looks like a stick to make things visually think it's not there or it's something different, there's some things that do it with sound, which is so freaky and cool. I love nature, and that's a great question, guys. This is one of the best Q&As I've ever seen and been a part of in years, so thank you guys for this. Mr. Hancock, we're coming back to you. We're going to do one more live round, and then we'll wrap up after that. Come on in. Take us away.
Amazing. One of our students was curious about the catching aspect and what the net is made of and how the net doesn't hurt the bats.
Yeah, that's a great question, and very important. So a lot of studies have been done to make sure that what we do doesn't hurt the bats, and which one of the telemetry, so the tracking aspects, is great because we can actually go and find them again, and we know the bat has been okay. The nets that we have, they're nylon mesh, and this has been used for, this is the same thing that people use for catching birds. And it's really loose, so the bats don't hit it hard. They hit and get tangled up, and then they kind of just stay there. And as I said, when the bats are in the nets, we bring them down right away because we can lower them. We carefully untangle them, and the people that do this are trained to be very gentle with the bats, and we take them out. And we haven't had any injuries in all the times I've been catching bats. And those are called mist nets. So they're kind of like, they're like a, I guess a mesh mist that hangs, and the bats just kind of fly into them. We have another trap that I didn't show a photo of, which is called a harp trap, which is almost better for the bats, but it can only be used in certain situations, like if we know where they're going to go out, because it's a smaller net. So we'll put this at a roost site where they fly out of a roost, like a garage, let's say, and they go, it's like 2 strands of fish line. So kind of think about a harp, like a musical instrument harp. They can get by the first little bit of string, and if you have a second harp behind, they kind of bump into the second one and go down into this bag that's at the bottom that just holds the bat, and they just stay there until we're ready to take them out, and they just stay down in this, like, it's an open bag that they can move around in, but also doesn't hurt the bats that way too.
I love when we get this question. We get this for anyone who's capturing animals. This speaks to a lot of questions we've had in the chat too about keeping bats as pets or holding them yourself. So as you mentioned, like, you should be a professional if you're dealing with wild animals, because if you're not, you're way more likely to hurt them. And we don't want to hurt our animal friends. So I love this message, and a great kickoff, guys. Thank you for that very, very much. Lavi, we're heading back to you. Mr. Dunn, Mrs. Fisher, you're good to be our final one. Come on in North Carolina. Hey, guys.
Hi. So I was also wondering, should people sell bat boxes next to pesticides at hardware stores so that people buy the bat boxes instead of the pesticides?
That is a great idea. And we do, like when I talk about bats, I try and do that and say, well, instead of pesticides, you can get bats. Not that you can actually buy bats, but if you buy bat houses, you can attract the bats and give them a place to stay. And yeah, that's a great idea. And I do know a lot of hardware stores do sell bat boxes. And it would be a great idea to put them beside the pesticide, probably with like a big sign to say what they'll do for you instead of having the pesticides there.
We're going to change the world. Lavi, way to go. That's our new campaign alongside Canadian Wildlife Federation to help the bats. Way to go, guys. Mr. Dunn, we're coming to you. Come on in. Hey.
Okay. Haley has a question.
How long has the bat as a species been around for?
Oh, wow. That is a great question too. It's millions of years. So they evolved way back when, along with like the early mammals as well. I think I don't even want to say a number because I don't know the exact date.
I got it.
You do.
It's one of those challenging questions. It's like off the cuff. So Eocene. So about 50 million years ago, we started getting the first fossil bats.
I was gonna say 30 million. So yeah, there you go. Thanks for stepping in for that.
We and I also did a bat allergy test. So it turns out there's like a medical thing called a bat test. So it really throws off the searching. But as best as I can tell, there's been no research on bat allergies ever in history. So you could be the first. You could give bats some like little peanut butter tests and see what's going on in the future. Great questions, guys. Man, Mrs. Fisher, come on in and take us away. Hey.
Why do bats hang upside down?
Oh, that's a great question. And I could have had that in my talk, but it's better that you asked even than me having it at the beginning. So think about the way bats will fly. They fly head first. So they hang upside down so that if they have to get away from a predator or fly out fast, they can just drop and fly forward and get away from or get out from their roost site. So it's basically just a way to make it easier for them to start flying. Something with bats, unlike birds, the birds, if you watch and you see, say, a robin on the ground, they'll just jump from the ground and start flying. Bats can't do that. They don't have strong enough legs, so they tend to have to fly from somewhere higher. So they'll have to perch up higher and then start flying downward and get their lift going. They can't really jump from the ground and get going. So that's also why they would hang upside down, is they can just climb up to where they need to fly from, and then they just drop down and start flying from there.
Oh, James, we've had such a fun ride together. I want to stress for all our kids, there's so much more to discover. Helpthebats.ca. You've got an amazing Bat 101 page in the Canadian Wildlife Federation, and National Wildlife Week highlights all the incredible species you're helping to protect there. No one does it better than the Canadian Wildlife Federation, folks. We've got bees tomorrow, eels on Thursday. Please do sign up. They're all going to be on our YouTube channel as well. So if you want to learn more, there's so much to explore and discover. Before I bring in all our classes to say a big enthusiastic goodbye, is there any final message about bats you want to leave us with? You've shared so much, but anything before we say bye?
I want to thank everybody for your interest in bats. This is great just to know that there's people that are, interested and care about bats and want to learn more. I think this is the first, real good step towards helping to conserve our bats, is people just understanding them a little bit better.
Yeah, guys, you guys are one of the best audiences we've ever had. So a big thank you to all of you. James, as you well know from joining us before, how we end up every broadcast, I'm going to bring in everyone for a big thank you and farewell. So Mr. Hancock, Lavi, Mr. Dunn, Mrs. Fisher, thank you so much.